y'all, welcome to Keeping It Real Estate with Kristen. I'm Kristen Goyette. I'm a mortgage loan officer, and this podcast is about all things real estate. And I'm super excited to have my friend with me today, Amanda Whited from Keller Williams Points East out of Greenville, North Carolina. And the reason why I'm so excited to have Amanda is because she also has a healthcare background like me, and we've both transitioned over into real estate. So with that being said, Amanda, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. So tell us about yourself, and because I know your story and it's very interesting.
That's right. It's a strange one.
I've heard worse, but no, it is very interesting, and you've got a healthcare background, and just talk to us all about that, and then your transition into the real estate world.
Sure. How I got into real estate. It definitely was not intentional. Growing up, I was raised basically in a my mom was a single mom from when I was 7 years old, but even prior to that, when I was itty bitty, she was finishing her master's degree. So she now is a master's level practitioner in psychology. So she's a licensed professional counselor.
Cool.
And when she was getting her degree, when she was starting her practice, I was just kind of always there with her. So I kind of grew up in psychology and felt like that's what I needed to do, wanted to do, never questioned it. Only dabbled in real estate just from, when I traveled, I was always kind of interested in looking at houses and different neighborhoods. What's that house cost? How big is that house? And I think a lot of people have that experience. And then I was an assistant to a realtor when I was 16. So did the sort of running around, putting signs in yards, getting ready for open houses. And even then I thought, oh, this is really interesting, but it never occurred to me that it could be a career because psychology was always it.
Right.
So I went to college, majored in psychology, went straight in to get my PhD in clinical psychology, and then went out to internship, fellowship, started practicing. And that was in Greenville, so here in Pitt County.
Okay.
My husband's job is what brought us here, and the particular job I was looking for in psychology we just couldn't find here.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, we have two choices. Either I can keep doing what I'm doing, which I don't enjoy, which I was not satisfied with.
Right.
Or I shift gears into something else just temporarily, and then we were going to go on a dual career search across the country where we could both find positions.
Right.
So I said, well, what can I do temporarily that I might enjoy that isn't going to take, another millions of years of education?
Right. Same.
Real estate, right? I can do real estate. I can get licensed in a couple months. This will be fun. Famous last words. I got addicted, really, to it. I enjoyed it. I got up to speed and got pretty good at it pretty quickly, I feel like. And before I knew it, I transitioned full-time into real estate and just really haven't looked back because it's treated me well. So a little bit of a 180, definitely not planned, but I think it all turned out for the best.
Same. And, we've talked about it before on a couple of other podcasts that, we're not growing up being taught to maybe one day you might like to be a realtor, or maybe one day you might like to be a mortgage loan officer. So a lot of people don't think about these careers until after the fact or for a second career.
Right.
That makes sense. So what you have come up quickly, I mean, you've become a high producer very quickly. So what's been the strategy to building your business?
I think because I didn't come into it with a background in marketing or business, I sort of, in Keller Williams, they like to talk about failing forward, and I've done quite a bit of that. Figuring out what didn't work and then finding a little niche that was kind of like, oh, that actually went pretty well. I should do more of that. And what about it went so well, and I can kind of double down on that strategy. So, my first year, I only sold 3 houses. I was part-time. I wasn't really quite ready to commit to real estate.
Right.
The second year, I think I did 28 transactions, so served 28 families, and I went, okay, I can do this full time. So part of it was just immersing myself and learning it and committing to it.
Right.
But then too, I think I've just built the business off of it's not about each transaction and saying, let me sell a house and get a paycheck, next house, next paycheck.
Right.
It's really been getting to know each client, developing a relationship with them, which honestly makes my job a heck of a lot more enjoyable than just seeing it as one transaction after the other.
Yes, absolutely.
Treating them right, and then they come back. So I don't pay for any leads. I don't, do any advertising dollars. It's just my clients who I've had the good fortune to come into contact with have come back to me and have sent other people to me. So I think my business has just been built around developing those relationships nurturing them and then just retaining those clients, hopefully for life. Time will tell, because it's still pretty early in the process.
Yep. And so what year are you on now?
So I got licensed in 2015, went full-time 2017 or 18. So I've been full-time 5 or 6 years now.
Okay, awesome. So how many people did you serve? You talked about your first and second year. So how many did you serve this past year?
So this past year was 46 families that I helped, which is not my highest year necessarily, but I think that's one of the downfalls in real estate is people focus on you have to do more and more and more and more.
Right.
Sometimes it's quality over quantity, and so I've learned to kind of think of goals from a number of different perspectives. And this year I think we're on track to serve about the same, perhaps a little bit more, maybe 50 to 55 families. I've done as many as 72, which was
crazy,
wild, very busy. But yeah, so we're at a comfortable pace at this point where I feel like we can really tailor every experience to each of our clients, and to where, I've got the time to kind of focus on making my business stronger every single month, every single year.
Right. And to produce like that, you do have an assistant.
I do.
And I know
have
she's
the
your
best
right-hand man.
assistant in the world.
Give her a little plug
That's
today
right.
in case she checks this out.
Sarah Hicks. So she is a fully licensed full-time assistant, and she's been with me, I think, since 2020 is when I officially brought her on board.
Awesome.
And I do not know what I would do without her. And it's funny, she's got a reputation around Pitt County of people are like, oh, Sarah's the best. You work with Sarah, you're so lucky. I'm like, yes, I know, because she's got my back and she pushes me. She holds me accountable. We literally have a board where it says, are you behind or ahead for your goal for the point where we're at in the year? And anytime I'm behind, you can believe it that she's going to let me know, and we're going to figure out how to kind of rectify that. So she's
awesome.
great. She's amazing.
Yeah, it's good to have a teammate like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when people come to you, what kind of specific advice are you offering your home shoppers? Even maybe not specifically first-time home buyers, even just any old person.
Yeah, and part of it is being able to adjust to the market. So, when I first got into the business, it was a buyer's market. There were over 1,000 homes on the market. It was a totally different ball game. Buyers were in the power position. They're not now. There's not enough homes on the market. So really, it's become much more of a high stress, high emotionality situation.
True.
So really, when I'm meeting with people, I'm assessing their needs, but also trying to determine sort of where their heads are at. And a lot of times we have a discussion about emotionality versus rationality when you're searching for a home.
Right.
I'm a firm believer that you can't just say, here's 87 criteria and the home that meets at least 80% of them, we can check those boxes, that's the home for us.
Right.
That's rational, but it doesn't always have the emotional piece. I still think, this is one of your biggest investments.
Right.
It's where you go to bed every night. It's where you wake up to start every day. It's got to feel right. So I tell people, we want you to purchase a home that checks the right boxes, that's financially comfortable for you, but it also should be one that, when you drive home at the end of a really stressful day at work, you can just sort of feel the decompression start and say, this is home.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have that emotional reaction to it too.
Yep.
So I think you've got to have elements of both. And so especially in a market that can be really high stress for people, because you have to battle it out for a house sometimes, to just sort of then refocus them and say, okay, how are we going to hit both of those parameters? And we're going to help you make the right choice, but help you make a choice that feels good too.
Right. I know several times this past week I've been helping clients and they're like, well, if the house is still there by the time I can make an offer, that's how they're coming to me, and I'm like, I know it's still a tough market. Don't listen to the news.
No.
Because they will trick you. It's still a very hot market. Maybe not in every market, but in a lot of our local markets, it is still very competitive.
It really depends. Different price points, different markets, different styles of homes. Yeah.
Right. So what's your primary service area?
So I'm mostly in Pitt County here in Eastern North Carolina. So that'll be, Greenville, Winterville, Ayden. I do, like right now, for example, though, I think I've got, Craven, Greene, and Lenore counties. I've got projects or clients that I'm involved in with those counties. So I kind of say Pitt County plus.
Right.
But I also have developed a lot of really, really good referral partners throughout North Carolina and the United States, and some even international. So even if somebody says, hey, I like your approach to real estate, but I'm in Wisconsin. How do I find a realtor? I've made so many connections with people, and if I don't know anybody in the area, I'm happy to do the legwork and say, let me do some research, do some interviews with agents, and I'll find the right person for you. So even though I only personally cover Pitt County and the surrounding areas, I can help launch somebody anywhere, truly.
Okay. So what's the biggest challenge for you right now in your business?
Slowing down to speed up, I would say.
Okay.
I'm fortunate enough that, back when COVID first started, I think a lot of us didn't really expect that the market would shift in the way it did, to be in a seller's market and to keeping us so busy. And I thought, okay, well, there's a little blip in the market, but then it's going to cool down inevitably, and I'm going to be forced to take a hiatus because the market's going to be difficult and not a lot of people are going to be doing real estate. I was incredibly wrong, because here we are several years later and it's still sort of churning and burning. So I find that the challenge for me sometimes is I want to make sure my clients are all taken care of. So sometimes I don't step back to work on the business. I'm just working in the business to make sure people are getting to closing, getting their house, bought or sold in the best way possible. So the challenge for me this year, which is why I hired another assistant who's part-time. I don't even know, this might be news to you.
No, I do remember you telling me that now. I forgot about that you had a new assistant.
Yeah, so we've got somebody else on board who's helping us do some things like client events. We have a wine tasting we're doing for some of our clients coming up soon. So a lot of the things that I wanted to do but didn't feel like I had the bandwidth to do without sacrificing something, on my clients' home purchases or home sales. I'm now sort of able to shift, and so that's been a challenge, but a good challenge, I think.
Right. I think that's the hardest part about getting started, because you are a one-man show on the front end, and you have ideas, but you can only do so much.
That's
and when you start kind of growing a little bit, but you're trying to, like myself, I've not been on social media in 2 days, and it's killing me on the inside, not for my personal, but for my business. But I can only do so much.
There's so many irons in the fire, and there's only so many hours in the day. In trying to figure out how to stay busy enough but not too busy, that's a delicate balance, and it's always it's a moving target.
Right. So cahoots to you for having some sense and go forth to get you some assistance and keep going and power through. But I love the wine tasting idea. You'll definitely have to tell me more about that later. But so let's talk about a meaningful transaction that you've had before. I know, honestly, I don't want somebody to sit here and don't think that every transaction means something. We have some sort of takeaway. But then there's always just those
the ones that are a little special and a little bit different. Yeah, because for some people, let's be honest, if they've bought and sold, 15 different properties, to them, they're kind of like, I've been here, done this before. It's not very exciting to them. Sometimes I feel like it's more exciting for me than them, which is really funny. But occasionally you'll get some where it's just, you can sort of sense that the client had to work particularly hard to get to the closing table, and to be part of that journey is pretty special. And I've had many, of course, that were meaningful to me, but there's one particularly that comes to mind. And this woman, she had middle-aged, single mom, had never owned a house, and it was always a goal of hers. Had always worked very hard, but just had some medical issues, just had some things thrown her way in life that were curveballs that seemed like just when she was getting ready to where she was financially in a position to purchase a home, something would happen. Lo and behold, it happened again when we were actually under contract on a house. So she had saved a bunch of money and said, Amanda, I was told I need to come talk to you. Let's start this process. So we found a phenomenal home, went under contract, and then her mother passed away.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just a time emotionally and financially. She said, well, I've either got to continue with buying this house, or I've got to find a way to pay for, funeral services and everything for my mother. And she said, that's no question for me. I know what I have to do. And I said, we'll hit the pause button. She had spent several $1,000s in the process, had to sort of kiss that money goodbye, and it depleted her coffers, basically. And she said, well, I'll come back when I'm ready. We stayed in touch. About 2.5 years later, she came back, and she was so excited. She said, Amanda, I told you I was going to come back when I was ready. I'm ready. And I said, okay, let's do it. So it was a more difficult market at that time, which was a hard adjustment for her, but she is nothing if not persistent. and to see how meaningful it was for her and those kiddos, their final walkthrough before we go to close it.
Oh.
They were in tears. I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. It was just so cool to be part of that.
Right.
Because she had worked so hard for it. And that's a very personal piece of the process, to be the one that helps them cross the finish line. Like,
Yep.
I will never forget it, ever.
Yeah, I think that's super rewarding. More rewarding on your end of the stick, because you do get that super personal relationship and
Right.
interaction, versus mine is more virtual telephone conversations. A lot of times I don't get to meet folks until
Right.
the closing table, but it's still rewarding talking to them. But I can definitely see where something like that would be very impactful to you. So this is kind of just off the cuff real quick, but just
Sure.
talking about people and the emotions that they go through, and you have a PhD in psychology. How do you feel like that has, I know it's helped you.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you feel like it's mostly helped you?
I'm to the point where I admire people who don't have the psychology background and do it, because I feel like I'm deploying those psychology skills every single day. And sometimes it's just a matter of helping people articulate and set their goals. But then there's the emotionality piece. And the thing with real estate is, to me, there are very few, maybe medical issues or procedures that can be obviously a very private process. But real estate, you know, you're dealing with people's emotions, their marriages, their relationships, their money. And it is just the perfect storm sometimes for people to really struggle. And so for me to be able to be the calm in the storm, you know, that's part of your training. Right, and step back and sort of see the forest for the trees.
Right.
So okay, here's how we can problem solve our way around this.
Right.
You know, here are the options we have in front of us, and here's kind of what I hear your goals are. So here's where I can guide you.
Right.
What's most comfortable for you. So really, part of it is just not getting sort of in the emotionality with them.
Right.
It's, I won't say easy, but it's pretty natural for me to step back and sort of be their calm guide through the storm.
Help them get focused, back focused, get back focused. That always helps.
Absolutely.
So when you do have a first-time home buyer come to you, do you have a separate kind of conversation for these folks, because they are lost in the sauce and have a million questions? They're my favorites. And they're like, I'm sorry I'm asking you a million questions. And I'm like, no, it's
ask
wonderful.
them. When somebody shows up and has like notes or a spreadsheet, I'm like, you're my kind of people. Bring it on. There's no question you can't ask me, that I'm not happy to address. So even for my people who aren't first timers, but especially for my first timers, I started this process of where we start meeting in my office for what I call a buyer consultation, but I've since had clients call it boot camp or a crash course, where I basically say, we're going to go through the whole process, and I draw on a whiteboard, start to finish, of what does it take money-wise and time-wise to purchase a house.
Cool.
Because a lot of times people come with these bits of information they've gathered from places that are just incorrect, and it's no fault to their own, but there's a ton of misinformation out there.
100%.
And it's, one of those, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see sort of situations.
Right.
So people will come in, even stuff like, oh, I don't know that I'm ready to buy a house because I know I need 20% for the down payment.
Yep.
Wrong.
And you need so much less.
I'm like, so few of my people ever do 20% down, and they're like, really?
Right.
Like, yeah, and I'm a hero just because of that. And that's wild that information is still floating out there that really is kind of outdated or misconstrued. So for my first timers especially, we sit down, I'm like, let me give you soup to nuts what the process looks like. We're going to understand your needs, and then we're going to get you pre-qualified to make sure you're making a wise financial decision, and then we just start ripping and rolling from there.
Right. That's awesome. You could make a whole little podcast yourself on that little diagram you're drawing out for people.
I mean, I
know you don't want to share all your secrets.
Oh, well, actually, I teach.
That would be super cool.
Even with our firm, I teach classes, so there are agents on how to do it.
Okay.
Like quarterly, we do classes on it, and every agent has a different way of approaching it, but I find that it's worked for me. It makes things more efficient for me. It makes my clients happier. I think it's just a win-win.
Right. So you've worn a lot of hats. I know you're an award-winning realtor. I forgot to announce that earlier. You've been a broker in charge.
That's right.
And now you teach some classes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any other hats in the real estate world that you
I mean,
wear?
every realtor wears them all, right? It's like
Gotcha.
could change day by day, but I think
Right.
honestly that's part of why I like it, is because there's a lot of diversity to what I do
Right.
in any given day.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no way to get bored. If there's a realtor that ever says they're bored, they're doing something wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
I always tell my friends, you definitely have to want to be challenged.
Yes.
And you definitely cannot be somebody who just likes mundane, like mastering something,
Right.
because every day is completely different. Every client is completely different. Every realtor or lender
That's right.
is completely different. And there's a lot of personalities and just all kinds of pieces to the puzzle that you have to
Yes.
work with. And to me, that's what makes it fun and interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't get bored or it doesn't feel monotonous. But sometimes
Yeah.
it can feel like, I just wish this was easy
It's
one
drinking out
day.
of a fire
Where's
hose. I
my
know.
easy?
There's no
button?
easy button.
No
No,
easy
and
button.
I feel like if you're the type of person that thrives off of working with people, but also is totally okay with controlled chaos, that's like
Right.
then come on to the real estate side of things. There's plenty to go
Absolutely.
around.
Absolutely. So what has changed in real estate since 2015?
It's interesting that I came in at a time when it was very clearly a buyer's market. Now it's very clearly a seller's market. So that's been an interesting shift. Hopefully we won't undergo the weird uncertainty and volatility that the pandemic brought. So I think that's been a really unexpected challenge for anybody in real estate over the past few years. But then too, social media like podcasts.
Right.
You know, TikTok, it's just not something that was part of the everyday language necessarily back then.
Right.
And now it just is. So
Right.
that's been different too, and that's one thing I'm working on this year, to try and be a little bit more systematically engaged in that, because it's fun and it's a
You
good
do a
way to
great
connect
job.
with clients.
Right.
I appreciate that.
You do a great job. So do you have like a TikTok channel, or okay, but you do a lot of reels.
So yeah,
And you have your
Instagram
business
and
page.
Facebook.
Okay,
Yeah.
Instagram and Facebook, because I do follow all your stuff, and I'm always like, my goodness, she is so creative, and I just love it. I mean, sometimes it's real estate related. Sometimes you're just pumping up a local business, which my friend Zach does that too. And it's just really cool that you do that, and you're obviously in the community and present, and I don't know, I like all the stuff that you do.
I
And
appreciate it.
See,
see
I don't
all
do
your
any
likes.
of that stuff. Yeah, I don't do any of that stuff, so I feel like I'm lost in the sauce, but it's just,
There's no
I feel
one
like
way
a
to do it.
boomer. I feel like a boomer.
I
My
feel-
son calls me a boomer.
Listen, I feel like I like to joke about how I'm like really just like a 90-year-old person in a almost 40-year-old's body. I'm like,
Yeah.
I love a jigsaw puzzle. I like to go to sleep at 9 o'clock. You know,
Right.
like they're just there. And technology is not my thing, but you know what? Hey, we roll with the punches, and
Well, I surely cannot tell. You do a great job.
I appreciate it.
So what's your biggest goal for this year? I know we're halfway through it, but what did you set as your biggest goal, and are you meeting it? What are you doing to get there?
Yes, so I am. When it comes to goal setting, I like to think that I'm a realist. It's interesting. Sometimes in real estate, you have these people who are just ultra entrepreneurial, huge thinkers, mover shakers.
Yeah.
That's not me. So I sort of say, okay, what realistically can I do and what makes sense? Because to me, if I set a goal that's up here and I don't achieve it, I'm going to be hard on myself.
Right.
And so for Sarah and Elisa, my newer assistant, we really like to hold ourselves accountable, and if you have a goal that's achievable, that's the recipe for success. So
Right.
this year I actually just wanted to do the same as what I did last year.
Okay.
So a lot of people were saying, look, it could be tough with interest rates. We don't know where they're headed going into
Right.
2023. You know, we don't know what inventory is going to look like. So even some people were forecasting, saying, hey, most realtors are going to do up to 30% less business than they did last year. So I said, you know what, I feel confident enough in my client base and in my support team that we can do the same we did last year. And now we're looking halfway through the year. It looks like
And
we're going to blow
exceeding
that
it.
out of the water.
Awesome.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. I
Yes.
didn't just jinx myself, but we'll see. So I think the biggest challenge is again to slow down, develop some more systems, and really kind of try and keep up the pace.
Right.
So
That's
we'll
awesome.
see.
I think that's great. So what would you be doing if you were not a realtor or having a PhD
Right.
in psychology?
Yeah, I think
Can't revert back to
No,
that.
I was going to say the easy answer is I just going back to go back to being a psychologist. And that's what I've always said. I said, oh, if the market crashes, I'll just, go do therapy because people will need it at that point.
People need it anyway.
Right. People always need it. People always need it. But, I think it's interesting, like being in real estate, I kind of do look back and say, did I miss the boat on being like an architect? Because I'm such a nerd. I love numbers, and there's something so satisfying about math that I'm like, oh, maybe that would have been the place for me to do that, because it would have had, obviously the home piece, house construction, but also kind of that mathematical piece.
Very interesting.
So I don't know, but then I'd have to go back to school for a really long time, so I don't know that I would do that, but I feel like that could be a role that I could really sink my teeth into. I don't think I'll ever do it, but I guess never say never, because I never would have thought I would have been doing anything but psychology. So
100%. I know before I became an LO, and I was talking with my friend about it, and I thought I was going to have to go back to school too. She was like, what about LO? And I'm like, I'm not going back to school. And she's like, you don't have to go back to school. Just take this class. And I'm like, I don't need a finance degree. And she's like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'll do that.
Doable.
But yeah, anything that requires a true college education, I'm done.
I've
put in my time.
School, yeah.
I've put in my time and money.
I mean, if I won the lottery, I'd go back and just get a degree in everything. I just would learn, because I think it's, when it's content that's interesting, I could do it all day long, but I'm like, oh gosh.
I'm a lifelong learner. I just don't like the pressure of school, and certainly not paying for it.
No, take
but
that part away.
just learning. Oh yeah, we're avid readers at our house, and lifelong learners for sure.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up today, tell us something fun or interesting about yourself that maybe you haven't told me yet.
Let's see. So I think people are surprised to learn about me, unless they've known me since I was young, that I'm an introvert at heart. People look at me, they're like, no, you seem so comfortable around people, and with your clients, and then you're always like going. I'm like, at the end of the day, I just want to go home and be by myself and my dogs. I'm happy to just go walk in the woods. I'm just truly an introverted person, but then there's an element of me that, I've got to engage with people. I'm curious about people, and so even though it does take a lot of effort and energy, I love it. But I think at the end of the day, I'm an introvert, so that shocks people.
Definitely.
And my little bit of trivia, anytime you do icebreakers, when you say, oh, tell me 3 things about you, and only, and one of them's not true.
Right.
It always shocks people, and rightfully so. If you've ever been in the car with me and heard me singing, I used to sing the national anthem at hockey games and baseball games back home in Alabama. Yep, and I don't even honestly remember how it got. Not anymore. No.
I lost the gift?
Yes.
Oh no.
Yes. But it's just one of those things that people are like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, you would not know it to hear me now at all. But it was something that I did for a while that's just, I think, a little bit unique. It was fun and horrifying at the time. Right. I did it.
Well, that probably prepared you for the real estate world.
That's right.
And being in front of people all the time.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing more embarrassing than, and two, I was young. I was at that age where you think everybody's watching you, everybody's judging you. It's like when I was between 13 and 17, I think.
Man, I feel like if you could do that during that age, you can conquer the world.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And if anyone watching is interested in connecting with you, what's the best contact?
So literally call me, text me on my cell, no matter what time of day, that's fine. So that's 252-999-2030, which I know sounds like a spam number, but it's not. Or you can find me on social media, Instagram and Facebook. So Home Sales by Amanda.
Home Sales by Amanda. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.